Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. The fabric of culture is changing very rapidly. We've seen more of it. We predicted that we're going to see more of it, and I'm saying it's probably going to continue to increase, and the high strangeness of our world continues to increase as well. We just got the story that archaeologists discovered a spherical object thought to be 1500 years old in Bosnia, and, this looks like something that would indicate some kind of high-level civilization in the ancient past. We have all this news about Mars, commercials, images taken from the orbiter mission, and just the focus on Mars in general through David Bowie, Buzz Aldrin, other outlets has been over the top. But then other mysteries like the Loch Ness Monster are being debunked, where there are reports that they found the actual prop from that famous picture. Meanwhile, mainstream science is just completely distracting you with a guy like Bill Nye, the science guy, not even a real scientist, out there just promoting the lie and talking about climate change and fighting that war, the climate change war, which the whole thing has been a psyop to keep us distracted from what's really going on. And so there's that. In Mexico City, you have a story coming out saying that archaeologists discovered a 16th century tomb of Catholic priests in former Aztec temples. I mean, what is going on? There is this big excavation happening, it seems like, of all this ancient knowledge or history of man, and just uncovering it all at once. It's almost like the authorities say, okay, let's get out of the bag. All right, we have our people in place to give explanations, and that goes all the way to the level of the Great Deception with aliens or whatever interdimensional or prehistoric man or whatever the case may be that they ultimately push as the agenda. It's all moving at such a fast pace now that you have to stay on your toes. You don't have to stay on top of all these news stories every single day. It's just overwhelming. There's no way we can handle that. But as things develop, we do have to start building a stronger faith, a stronger collective. And I think this is what the revival is. It's the gathering of people, of Christians, of believers who understand this coming persecution. And you want to talk about opening up gateways through the brain or through understanding the brain. I've talked about that before. But there's a story that came out that basically showed how LSD, they did a brain scan of someone who is having the effects of LSD, or what's known as acid, and they visualized how the brain looks when on acid. So check this out. Here's what Dr. Carhart Harris said. He said, "Normally, our brain consists of independent networks that perform separate, specialized functions such as vision, movement, and hearing, as well as more complex things like attention. However, under LSD, the separateness of these networks breaks down, and instead, you see a more integrated and unified brain. Our results suggest that this effect underlies the profound altered state of consciousness that people often describe during an LSD experience. It is also related to what people sometimes call ego dissolution, which means the normal sense of self is broken down and replaced by a sense of reconnection with themselves, others, and the natural world. This experience is sometimes framed in a religious or spiritual way and seems to be associated with improvements in well-being after the drug's effects have subsided." So again, they're scientifically showing how these portals are opening up, and through things like LSD, which has been a CIA-controlled operative since its inception. I'm sorry, folks, if you thought it was like cool to be hanging with the LSD and the drug culture and all that. Yeah, that's part of the whole system as well. So the CIA, the dark elite, have had control over these things for a long time. It fulfills prophecy about pharmakeia, deceiving people. This is it right here. In Revelation 18:23, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." The Greek word for sorcery is pharmakeia, medicine, drug, spells. This is it right here, where we're starting to see the quote-unquote scientific evidence to justify things like this and this expansion of consciousness at a scientific level. And this is a deception. And the nuances of it, I'm not even quite sure yet. I think we'll know as things become quote-unquote normalized in society. And the point here is that it causes every race, every nation to wander or be deceived. So this is for the whole planet, all of humanity. But remember, Jesus made an exception for the elect, And the elect are those who know the gospel, who know the truth. And the fact that these were the great men of the earth conducting this. Who are the great men of the earth today? The New World Order, the New Babylon, the ones who claim to be illuminated. These are the people, the great men, the current day magistrates. Then you have your merchants, you have your bankers. And at the beginning of the passage here, it talks about how the light won't shine in Babylon any longer, which means, some people have taken it as this is the rapture. This is when the church is already gone. That's why afterwards these things happen. That's definitely a possibility. But I would suggest that this is more of a because of situation where the light will no longer shine in you no longer because of these things, how the merchants and the great men of the earth deceive the nations with sorcery, etc., etc. So both can be happening at the same time. And I think with everything going on all around the world and with stories like this coming out, it's such a relevant article to passages that were written 2,000 years ago about the future. Revelation 18:23 being one of those things that relates to this. And either this is just a great coincidence or there's a God and he's orchestrating stuff and he's showing us that he's in control and his prophecies are going to be fulfilled and the world is going to experience this great deception. And one of its means is sorcery, pharmakeia. And of course, that opens up a lot more than just LSD. We're talking about the whole industry of medicine, pharmacology, and all that. It's a huge industry. It is one of the biggest tentacles of the New World Order system. And if you think about power structures, how does a group get real power out there? They get it through official means and unofficial means. Okay, so they take control of the political, military, official, public arm, right? Which is the military-industrial complex, but they also take over the underground. That's where the whole mafia thing comes in, but also in Japan, the Yakuza, these elite can give both sides immunity by being the middleman and controlling the systems, the laws. And so, of course, they can control the underground. And if you think about the underground drug industry, it's absolutely ridiculous. How does a guy who is caught and is labeled a drug dealer from Mexico and one of the head guys, how does he still communicate with the outside world and make drug deals from within prison through codes and stuff like that? So controlling the underground networks is also a part of this, and that's why when you look at the elite system, you look at all the structures of society, you have to have these public institutions in order to control the dark underbelly. And this is what the New World Order system, the New Babylon system has done. So when you see stories like this or see any kind of news item, which there's a lot going on with like space and our ancient history and archaeology and, just things are just moving very quickly. And meanwhile, we're being bombarded with this mind trauma with action movies and, entertainment media and all these things are just, it's pretty mind-numbing if you think about it in terms of the level that people are receiving it today as opposed to most of human history, I would say. So there's a definite hypnotic effect happening. And within that, they cause trauma. These action films and all these big blockbuster movies is basically mind control trauma, right? They do like big explosions and fights and all this stuff. It's part of making your mind overwhelmed by what's happening and getting us used to or conditioned for that feeling. So when they do carry out certain things, it almost numbs us. And, I think all of us who lived and were, cognizant of what was happening through 9/11 felt that. I certainly did. I remember thinking this is kind of like a movie. It makes me feel like I'm watching a movie, but this is real life. And so that exchange in conditioning the minds of the nation and the world really with events through movies and entertainment and then carrying out certain actions, the separation between reality and science fiction are blurred, and they're blurred way more now than ever before. And so I think we're going to continue to see all this. And that's the point. As science fiction blurs more with reality, right? And in a scientific way, right? The approach is still scientific and technological and very, on the straight and narrow in terms of officialdom or industry or institution. If you're going to accept things that were once considered myth or crazy, like aliens or ancient astronaut theory or whatever, if those things are seriously being considered through the official networks because they have some kind of truth to it, and you once thought it was a myth, then think about what the Bible says and think about just the confluence, the cohesion of stories that line up with Scripture. And you have to accept that there may be some truth in Bible prophecy as well. And this is really important to think about because if you haven't considered the Bible as truth, it's something you should look into at the very least to understand, those of us who are saying that, where we're coming from. And if all of us did more of that, I think we would be less violent, I would say, because, a lot of times violence, even within, little small social circles or bar fights or whatever the situation, it's usually 99% of the time, I would say even more, a misunderstanding, right? Somebody jumps the gun, comes to conclusions about somebody else, and a fight breaks out. Most physical activity is like that around the world. Wars are intentional because you're going through large systems. Those sorts of emotional responses should not play a part or a role in, bombing a nation or an area or whatever. And I get it, there is rogue evil or rogue violence. I understand that, but there is also highly organized violence. And the point I was making earlier, which ties to this, is that the things that you think are rogue violence may not be rogue violence. Ultimately, ISIS, the mafia in the past, all these underground networks, they were also just as much part of this whole system that's happening in the official world, right? So that's a little rant about everything going on, with the centerpiece of this rant being that scientific investigation into consciousness and everything else. And again, there's a lot more to this topic. We can get into DMT and how that is part of this whole process as well. And also, because some of these chemicals like DMT is naturally produced in the brain, I do believe that God can use it to give us supernatural experiences. And that's not something we should seek, but if God gives us an experience, or people that do have an encounter, could it be through that process or mechanism? And furthermore, is the veil that is placed between heaven and earth have something to do with the pineal gland and everything else? Those are videos that we'll get into in the future, but for now, the important point is that the one who's going to restore all of this is Yeshua, Jesus, God in human flesh, who sacrificed his life for ours. And we have to acknowledge that. And once we do that and we have our firm grasp on that truth, then I think as we are called to, we can explore different topics that might be difficult or challenging or not looked at a lot. But we're doing it with the light of Christ shining, right? Not our own light, not our own knowledge, our own intellect. We're using God's light to guide our path and to expose these areas. So that's about it. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.